Hello again. I'm Marian May and I'm a human design non-analyst. In other words, I've done all the training and I haven't actually taken the final exam. So that makes me not a certified analyst, but somebody who's been studying these patterns, this knowledge for about 13 years now, and made a commitment to live my design this way. So what really made a difference, big difference for me, was when I started to actually look at the transits. Transits is something that's sort of off there in the background. So when you first get your chart, you always want to know about you. What does this mean about me? How do I do me? How do I live me according to this new set of rules that I seem to have dropped into here? When you move beyond that and begin to get a hang of that, then the fascinating thing is to look at, well, how is this whole transit thing affecting you? Because you can look at your chart and go, well, yes, I get this bit. But everywhere where there's whiteness, it really isn't a blank page. Now, I really like to emphasize this when I give readings to people. If you think of this more as a kaleidoscope, where all the energies of the planets, the stars, and the other people that whose auras we pass through, all of that is there in the white parts, not just the white centers, it's the white gates, the white channels. And the big reason we need our strategy and authority is not so that we can get invitations, it's not so that we can get the work that gives us satisfaction, it's actually so that we can navigate through this huge, vast ocean of little tiny, minuscule energy packets of conditioning. That is where we live. Now, in human design, we talk about conditioning in two different ways. One of the ways is to describe our past conditioning, how we've been conditioned away from living who we are according to our design. So that's the first bit we want to get in, is how do I come back to myself through my own strategy and authority. But conditioning never stops. So whilst you're doing that, clearing out of the old conditioning, at the same time new conditioning is also coming in. And this is where it can get a bit confusing, because is this about my past? Is this about now? And it really doesn't matter. You don't need these kind of mental conundrums to try and work out, when you understand that actually everything is about how you're navigating it all, whether it's past, present, whatever it is. It's all about how you navigate it correctly through your strategy and your authority now. And then it really clears your mind and your cognition can really come into effect. So this is why I see the transits as being relevant and important, because it helps again to give us this sense of, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what it feels like when this particular thing lights up in me that I maybe don't usually have. So without having to be present with somebody else and know their design in order to be able to analyze things, it's much easier actually when you just look at what the transits are doing. Okay, so basically conditioning comes through all these tiny, tiny, tiny particles called neutrinos. They were discovered in the 1990s or something like that, but they're passing through our body, they pass through everything, and they pass through so quickly. They have a minuscule amount of mass, I believe, and that's what actually enables them to carry tiny, tiny pieces of energetic information. So everything they pass through, they're constantly doing this exchange. A little packet of information dropped off, a little packet picked up. And this is the energy that we experience from, this is how we experience the energy from the planets, because the neutrinos, which come out of stars, pass through these planets and pick up the imprint of the energy of that planet. But then they also pass through other people as well. But when we're looking at the transits, we're really looking at these planetary imprints, because obviously planets are huge, big, vast things hanging around in space. So trillions and trillions of neutrinos pass through these planets and bring us the imprint. So without the awareness of your strategy and authority, it's these conditioning elements that can easily control your life. And as you begin to study the transits, you can begin to see this element of external control coming into your life. So as I said before, strategy and authority, you correctly navigate this neutrino ocean. Correctly, meaning just correctly for your form. Anyone who's been in human design for any amount of time knows that correct doesn't mean the difference between right and wrong. It's just, it's not a moral system. It's just what's correct for your form in this life. And then the beauty of this is that your passenger consciousness really gets to see what is correct for it to see. So it's sitting there in the back seat of the limousine, looking out of the window at life. What is it going to be seeing? Well, of course, if you're traveling down the wrong roads or you're going through life in an incorrect fashion, then what it sees is distorted. So this brings you the clarity, and that passenger consciousness gets to see. So what we're looking at here, this current neutrino imprint, is mapped in what's called a just now chart. And this just looks similar to a birth chart, but with only the black imprints. Okay, so let's look at what we need here. Okay, so in order to do this, obviously you need your own chart. If you haven't got that already, you can get it from Jovian Archive. Then you need something like a Ravi Ching or this definitive book of human design, which lists all the channels and all the gates and all the lines within it, as well as telling you about all the centers in their defined state and their undefined states. This is all the information that you need. And then you need to grab a just now chart. It's the one on the right here with just the black lines showing. You see it's different from a natal chart because there is only one column of information on the black on the right there. I grabbed this one from Jovian Archive yesterday when I was making this presentation. And then you just need some pens or pencils. You know, you don't have to buy or invest in levels of software to do this, to just get going. You can just do it in a very old-fashioned way. Okay, so with these things we can carry on. So the sun and the earth have the strongest energy, by far the strongest. Obviously because the sun is a star, it's putting out these neutrinos. So the first thing you're going to want to study is the position of the sun. And as you see on this chart I have here, the personality sun is in 51.5. So that stays there for roughly, it's around a day, shall we say. It's not entirely a day, but there's the imprint for the day, 51.5, and then the earth below it in 57.5. So these are its strongest imprints. So then you can go and look that up in your Ravi Ching or your human design book, read the description of it. And don't worry if your mind goes, oh, I don't get it. This information in many ways isn't for the mind. But once you've read it, then just kind of go about your day and just observe, look around you, see inside yourself. What kind of thoughts are coming up in your mind? Okay, so this is the first level of analysis really, is that you're looking to do this kind of analysis with the sun. And that might be all you want to do. But if you want to go a bit further, then I'd say what you want to do is draw all the black and activations from the just now chart onto your own chart, like I've done here in turquoise. Okay, so anything that doesn't already appear in your natal chart, you just transfer it over, because this is the imprint. As I said, remember it comes into your whiteness. Everywhere where you have undefined channels, gates and centers, this is where it comes in. Okay, so what's happened when I put these two charts together, and this is my chart that I've used here on the left, is that it's created some new channels and therefore also given me temporary definition of both the spleen and the root centers. Because when you get a new channel forming, it joins the two centers and activates both of the centers. So I'm going to be looking on this particular day at the conditioning patterns in my root, in my spleen, and in these channels, as well as the great influence of the sun. So of not self behavior, particularly for me on this day, would be to really feel that I can be spontaneous and make impulsive decisions, maybe to try and force some kind of change through that channel of transformation. Change of behavior. 5710 is about perfected form, how intuition informs the behavior of the self, and to instinctively express some kind of intuition. 5720, the channel of the brainwave. And now with the gate 51 in the sun, the gate of arousal, this could be a dangerous time of really kind of incautious leaping into the unknown and stirring things up, just because the mind gets restless with the root pressure, driving things through to the throat there, can feel a sense of restlessness in the body. And that's actually what I experienced yesterday. It wasn't so easy for me to sit still and do my journal writing in the morning. It wasn't so easy for me to just settle into something. When I was doing some meditation, it was like I was just physically more restless than usual. And because I, again, know this, I've worked with this, noticed this over the years, I know that this doesn't mean I therefore have to rush off and do something. That's the not self aspect of the root, of the undefined root, is that when that pressure comes in, to feel like suddenly there's a need to do something in a hurry. And then with 51, initiation, in there, that kind of warrior spirit of kind of like, well, I'm going to hurry up and just take a great big leap. You know, seeming to feel that survival is guaranteed, because again, with a defined spleen, there can be that feeling like, well, I know how to survive and be spontaneous. Now, this conditioning is not me. So although I can feel all these things, I can feel the pressure, I can feel that quality of the spleen and the spontaneity and that sense of being able to survive, it's not me. So I should not be making decisions from that. If I make decisions from that, they'll be not self decisions. So the thing always is to come back to, what does the authority say? What is the authority guiding in terms of action and speech? All right, and then to go from there. And then these things sometimes can support. So this not self behavior of suddenly being spontaneous and jumping into things and trying to make things change would create more bitterness, as I'm a projector, in my life. Now, if I was going through my inner authority, then the additional conditioning energy could actually be used correctly. And quite possibly it's what helped me to put this presentation together, although I didn't record it yesterday. But there was enough energy available from the root to be able to express the logic, the logical side, which I don't have much logic in my chart, but I could put together a logical presentation to have something to express about the perfected form, which is how do we survive the transits? How do we survive the conditioning energy of the transits? You see, I'm using that through my authority rather than using it to make decisions. I'm using the wisdom that I've gained through my open centers of how I'm reading this information rather than believing that it's who I am and using it to make decisions. So as I said at the beginning, initially you look at the sun, and does that form a connection anywhere in your chart? Because again, that's going to influence how you feel it. Does it create a channel? Very powerful when those channels come in. What do you notice about what comes alive in you at that time? Is it in a defined or an undefined center? Now in this case with the 51, it was in an undefined center for me. So it could be bringing up some elements of old conditioning that I get to witness and feel and kind of go, oh yes, I see that thing from my past. I now know that that's a thought pattern. I don't need to act on it. So what you will see is these things appearing in your mind, right, particularly from the sun. What thoughts do you have? So if gate 51, you read it, it's called the arousing. It's an energy of shock. It's the shock and adaptability. is one able to actually, is the will able to adapt to a sudden shock and change of circumstances? So the kind of thoughts that might come out of this are thinking about or having a feeling of a need to fight or overcome or compete with something or someone. And now this could be something from your past where you've had to think you had to fight or compete. Think about, you know, schooling and how important competition was there to come first. All that kind of energy can be in here. Or has something shocking happened around you? Now, I was fortunate enough this morning to just experience quite a mild shock, but I still felt that quality of shock enter my body. I recognized the frequency of it. And then how do you respond? You know, do you then use a not self ego response that kind of is like, well, I've got to fight back against this shock? Or, you know, or does your own authority manage to take the response? And I'm reminded of, particularly with this gate of shock, of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which has come up a few times in things I've been listening to recently. And about these kind of layers of need and the way they're sort of in a pyramid. And apparently Maslow never drew a triangle, never did a pyramid. But even so, it's the same kind of thing. There's kind of layers in our life of foundational things that we put down that we then build on top of. And the whole energy of a shock will take us down to the most secure layer. So sometimes when a shock comes in, it can shock you right down to whatever your foundational level of security is. And from there, then you need to adapt, you know, build something that's more secure, perhaps, in place of what was ultimately revealed as fragile. So again, you're looking at how this affects you, but also how does this affect people in the world around you? Particularly if you're looking at social media, if you're looking at the news, you know, do you notice that some weeks a lot more shocking things happen than others? Do you notice that these themes in the sun seem to play out? Are they there in the headlines? Are they there in your interactions with friends and acquaintances in social media? Because the more you notice, the more you become aware, the less this is unconsciously controlling you. This is what the benefit of this is. It could all look very pretty and go, oh, I know what's going on in the world, la-di-da me. It's about the awareness that enables you to disconnect from taking it personally. Okay, well, this is me, this is who I am. For a week, I'm this warrior ego. I'm going to go out and I'm going to give it some. No, it's about becoming aware so that it doesn't control your life, so that you get to clear these open windows in your design so you can see the world through them. That's where your wisdom comes from. So the other thing that I mentioned earlier is that, you know, it will create additional channels and bring in extra gates. Let's just look at the kinds of ways it does this. There's something called an electromagnetic connection. And this is where, say, the transit has one gate, and it connects with the opposing gate in your design. The example I've given on the right here would be the 41 and the 30, the channel of recognition of feelings, and would define both those centers in somebody who maybe normally didn't have those centers defined. If it just fills in, you know, if something just fills in as a gate and those centers are already defined, then that's going to flavor the quality you have in that energy center, but it might be much more nuanced and subtle than if you are undefined and suddenly you get a temporary definition of that center. So it's how do you feel the energy of these defined centers when they're temporarily defined in your body, particularly if it's something strong like the motor, like, you know, the root, or the solar plexus, or the will center, or for projectors and manifestors, the sacral center. And then just notice which not self themes are occupying your mind. Again, you can grab this on Google. That exists in various Facebook groups, and I've listed it in one of my other videos. The not self themes, the one about conditioning, the not self themes of each of the centers. Now, they're just given as a one-liner, but of course they're vastly more complex than that. When we just look at the undefined ego center, how many different ways can you invent of trying to prove yourself? You know, as I've discovered in 13 years, you know, there's almost infinite number of different ways that can still be operating, very subtly nowadays, hopefully. So just again become aware. What do I feel in my body? How is this making me think? What are the thoughts that I associate with this? Restlessness from the root center means I must do something about it. That's the old conditioning. Nowadays, you can sit with restlessness in the root center. That's interesting. I can feel that. That doesn't mean I have to act on it. Or I go into my authority to decide, to choose whether it's correct for me to act on it. It's a wonderful thing when you suddenly get a transit come in that really helps you, and your authority goes, yeah, I can use this energy right now. Like I said, I can use the temporary definition of the root energy. It gives me a little bit more oomph to actually get something going. In my otherwise motorless design, suddenly I have a motor to use. But I'm expressing what I want to be expressing. I'm not expressing the not self of the root, which is hurry up, get something done. You must do it in a hurry. Something must change. You must make something happen. That's not what I'm expressing here. Okay, so then we get educational channels. And this is where there's a channel in the Just Now chart, which happens infrequently. It's not all that often. And it meets a completely white channel in your own chart. So this is where you can much more clearly see how this operates outside of you, because you've got nothing in that channel to kind of get in the way or filter it. And again, you can see how it operates, how it feels, and what thoughts come up about it, and just begin to notice, oh, okay, so that's how that one works. Now with the Just Now chart, when we're looking at the sun and the earth, you get you get 6 days in each gate pairing, so the sun and the earth. When we're looking at the planets below Jupiter, they've got much longer cycles, and these provide for much more deep conditioning patterns over time. And often the real effects of them aren't seen until they move on. So especially with something like Neptune, in gate 22 at the moment, the gate of openness, social openness. That's a very long conditioning pattern. And if you happen to have gate 12 in your design, that will have made a temporary connection between those two. But the power of them, if you like, is less. So they're less powerful and more nuanced, but they go on a lot longer. And then we have the nodes, which provide the environmental conditioning, nodes of the moon. And these appear to travel around the wheel in reverse order, and they always go from line 6 to line 1. Whereas the sun and the earth will start in line 1 and go up to line 6. So it starts with the transpersonal in the nodes, transpersonal gate lines 5 and 6, okay, 6, 5, and then coming down into the personal. And again, if you really do like to watch the transits, it can be very interesting to watch how these happen, how these affect people, and how often the transpersonal doesn't really get going. It's not until it gets down to the 4, 3, 2, 1 does you really begin to see the effects in the world around you. And interestingly, because I'm recording this in April 2020, when we have the COVID-19 virus outbreak, just prior to this, we had in the nodes the 52 and the 58. Now, one of the incarnation crosses these make up part of is the cross of healing. They're about stillness, and then the joyousness that is the drive for rooting out corruption. And interestingly, how gradually nations around the world were brought to a standstill. So by the time the 52 and the 58 shifted into the next two, an awful lot of the world was in a apparent standstill. It was in the stillness of the 52. It was the stillness and the focus. And of course, all the focus and attention was on healing. How are we going to heal this virus, heal from this virus? What do we need to do? So very, very interesting to see. They're not always that dramatically obvious around the world, but that one was particularly notable. And then if you want to get deeper into the real mysticism aspects or most of this, the cosmology, then we're looking at, there are even longer cycles. And you've probably, if you've been around human design for a while now, you'll have come across the magical date 2027. And this relates to things like locks and keys, and there's a background frequency. So there's a background pattern of conditioning that holds for about 400 years, 450 years or whatever it is. We've been in the cross of planning. We're currently in the final 7 years of this cross of planning, and that's the gates 16, 9, 37 and 40. And in 2027, this shifts into the cross of the sleeping phoenix with 34, 20, 55 and 59. Totally different kind of pattern. We haven't ever experienced such a shift within the last 400 years, and this time we get to see it correctly with strategy, authority, and the benefit of human design, to be able to see these energies, understand the potentials. We can't really know what it's going to be until we live it. But now, if ever, is the time to be really knuckling down, getting on with strategy and authority so you can navigate this crossover time. It's coming in with the energy of shock, which is what we have had in this week. That's part of the cross of the sleeping phoenix that's coming in. The other cross that goes with it, which I can't remember the name of. But anyway, as I say, if you want to investigate that deeper, that's the, if you like, the background layer of the conditioning. So that forms the very backdrop of the conditioning pattern, and then where the sun and the earth and the current planets are at the moment is slightly more in the foreground, and that's how we sort of look at these transits. So I hope you will enjoy studying some of the transits, be able to take something from this that you can take and use, and begin to see why strategy and authority comes up time and time again on the Facebook groups and all over the education, because this is how we are needing to navigate our lives moment by moment in this ocean in order to not be driven into the unconscious reactivating of not self themes, which, as we know, don't bring us what we want. They bring us the frequencies of our not self, the anger, the bitterness, the frustration and the disappointment. So it's not necessarily about feeling good, feeling light and happy. This is about actually knowing that there's one thing that you can trust when everything else seems to be going completely to pot. And this is very much, this is very, very much, I realise, gate 51, line 6. You know, if you alone can stand in the middle of all the chaos and know what's correct for you, this is what strategy and authority gives you. So as the tides of fear sweep through humanity, as the tides of chaos come about, you can lock in to your own correct trajectory and get the experiences that are for you. It doesn't guarantee that you'll like them, doesn't guarantee that they'll be fun and enjoyable, but there is a quality of living that feels, I can't even put a word on it, but it feels worth having once you've got it, that knowing, that inner trust that you can trust yourself to navigate this, your strategy and your authority, so your mind doesn't have to worry about it. Oh, look at that thing going on over there, what shall I do about it? Just falls out of existence. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be concerned, because until your strategy and your authority come together, you don't do anything. And that is the great freedom that we have through human design. As I say, this in 7 years coming up to this transit, it's going to be a really key time to get that, and to understand your transits is really what helps you lock into that frequency as well, by becoming much more aware of what's conditioning you and how you're responding to it through your own authority. So I hope that helps. Any questions, you can contact me. I'm on Facebook, or you can go by my website and contact me through there, marianmay.co.uk. Thanks for listening.